The sun had just begun to rise over the endless plains of Arizona, casting a golden glow across the ranch. Dew sparkled on the tall grasses, and the distant mountains painted a jagged silhouette against the morning sky. The rancher, a man in his 40s with weathered hands and a lifetime of sun on his skin, was tending to his cattle, moving slowly down to the creek that ran behind his home. He liked the quiet mornings, the way the air smelled crisp and earthy, and the gentle ripple of water that brought life to the land. As he approached the creek to check the water level, his eyes caught a flicker of movement. At first, he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or a coyote, but as he squinted against the sunlight, he realized it was something else entirely. There, in the shallow waters, was a young Apache woman, bathing. The sight stole his breath for a moment. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her hair was long and black as midnight, flowing like a river over her shoulders, and her skin glowed with a warm, sun-kissed radiance. The way she moved in the water was both graceful and deliberate, a blend of strength and delicacy. The rancher ducked instinctively behind a large mesquite tree, heart pounding. He hadn't intended to spy, but he couldn't look away. She was a fugitive, he realized suddenly, the tension in her posture, the wary glance over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. Something about her aura told him she had been running for a long time, hiding from something dangerous. And yet, there was a freedom in her presence, a wildness untamed by fear or captivity. He noticed the small details, the way her fingers traced patterns on the water's surface, the faint scars on her arms, hints of past battles or hardships, and the way her eyes, dark and piercing, seemed to look beyond the creek, beyond the plains, into a horizon only she could see. The creek itself seemed to respond to her presence, shimmering brighter, the birds calling louder as if to acknowledge her arrival. The rancher's mind raced. Should he approach? Should he remain hidden? He knew the world outside his ranch was harsh, filled with settlers, soldiers, and lawmen who often hunted Apache people without mercy. Yet in that quiet moment, the woman seemed untouchable, a vision from another world entirely. He stayed still, leaning against the rough bark, feeling the cool breeze brush his face and the faint scent of wildflowers mixing with the earthy aroma of the creek. She finally lifted her gaze, scanning the surroundings cautiously, then turned her back to the water and disappeared into the trees. The rancher waited for a long time, listening to the soft rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds, and the slow trickle of water. His heart still raced, a strange mix of awe and concern. Who was she? Why was she here? And most importantly, could he help her without causing her to run again? As the sun climbed higher, painting the plains with light, the rancher knew that his quiet mornings would never be the same. Something extraordinary had entered his life, a fugitive beauty whose story had just begun, and he was determined, in some small way, to be part of it. The morning after the encounter, the rancher couldn't shake the image of her from his mind. The memory of her dark, piercing eyes and the graceful way she moved in the creek haunted him as he went about his daily chores. The cattle needed feeding, the fences needed mending, but his thoughts kept drifting to the shadow of the young Apache woman, hiding somewhere in the trees behind his home. He wondered if she had seen him, if she knew someone was watching, if she would ever return. By evening, he decided he could not simply wait. He filled a small woven basket with bread, dried meat, and some fresh fruits from his orchard. The items were simple, but he hoped they would convey safety and kindness rather than intrusion. With the basket in hand, he approached the creek cautiously, keeping to the far edge of the trees, making sure he was visible but not threatening. He placed it carefully on the bank and stepped back, watching, holding his breath. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a movement in the underbrush, careful, measured, caught his eye. She emerged slowly, eyes scanning the area, muscles tensed like a coiled spring. When she saw the basket, she froze. Her gaze shifted to him, sharp and wary, and he quickly lowered his head slightly, trying to appear non-threatening. She studied him silently, her expression unreadable, then, with the smallest of gestures, accepted the offering. She took the bread, sniffed the fruit, and vanished back into the trees. The rancher exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and concern washing over him. He didn't know her story yet, but he could sense the weight she carried, a burden of survival and escape from those who sought to harm her. He respected her space, understanding that trust could not be demanded, only earned. That night, he sat outside, staring at the stars above the Arizona plains. The quiet of the desert was both comforting and unsettling, echoing the solitude he had always known. But now, that solitude was shared, even if unknowingly, with the fugitive woman whose presence lingered in his thoughts. He imagined her life, fleeing soldiers, hiding in the wilderness, surviving on instinct and skill. There was a strength in her that humbled him, a resilience forged in hardship. Over the next few days, he continued the silent offering of food. Slowly, she became bolder, appearing earlier in the morning, lingering longer by the creek. He began to notice the subtle ways she studied him, gauging whether he posed a threat, observing his movements, reading his intentions. He marveled at her intelligence, the quiet confidence in every gesture. She was a survivor, cautious yet unyielding, her beauty not just in appearance but in spirit, in the way she faced the dangers of the world without fear. Though they had not spoken, a connection was forming, fragile, unspoken but undeniable. Two worlds, so different, were brushing together, the rancher with his steady, grounded life and the fugitive with her untamed spirit. Each day, as she moved through the creek or vanished into the trees, he felt the pull of a story that was only beginning to unfold, a story in which trust, kindness, and courage would have to guide the next steps. Days turned into a week, and the creek became a quiet meeting place, though still unspoken. The rancher noticed her becoming more comfortable, lingering near the water longer, her eyes scanning the horizon but no longer darting nervously at every sound. He had stopped leaving the basket from a distance, now placing it closer to where she bathed, hoping the gesture of trust would speak louder than words. One morning, the sun had barely broken the horizon when she appeared again. This time, she didn't vanish immediately upon seeing him. Instead, she paused at the edge of the creek, her dark eyes fixed on him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. He slowly sat on a nearby rock, hands resting on his knees, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He spoke softly, his voice low and steady. "You don't have to hide from me," he said, "I mean no harm. I just want to help." She didn't respond, but he noticed the slightest relaxation in her posture. Over the next several days, their interactions remained silent but meaningful. He would leave small items, fresh water in a jar, a blanket in case the nights grew cold, a few tools she might find useful. Each offering was accepted with careful grace, and she began to return them with small tokens of her own. A beautifully polished stone, a wildflower picked from the meadow, subtle gestures that hinted at growing trust. Finally, one late afternoon, she stayed longer than usual, letting the water run over her shoulders as the rancher watched from a distance. Gathering courage, he called out softly, "What's your name?" Her eyes flicked to him, and for the first time, she responded with a whisper, almost lost in the rustling wind, "Aylin." Hearing her name stirred something in him, a sense of connection and humanity he hadn't expected. He spoke gently, introducing himself in return. "I'm Samuel," he said. The sound of names exchanged, simple as it was, bridged the gap between their worlds. It was a start, a fragile bond forged in trust, courage, and necessity. Over the next few weeks, Aylin slowly revealed pieces of her story. She had escaped from soldiers who hunted her people, fleeing into the wilderness to survive. She spoke sparingly, never more than what felt safe, but Samuel listened carefully, absorbing every word. The more he learned, the more he respected her spirit, a life lived in danger, yet untouched by bitterness, guided by resilience and pride. Samuel, too, shared bits of his life, the ranch, the cattle, the quiet isolation of the plains. Though their worlds were different, their stories intertwined through shared moments of trust and silent companionship. Each day, the creek became a place of learning and understanding, a sanctuary where danger felt distant, if only for a while. By the time summer fully settled over the Arizona plains, a subtle bond had grown between them. Words were no longer always necessary, trust, gestures, and shared experiences carried meaning. Samuel realized that helping Aylin was no longer just an act of kindness, it had become something deeper, a mutual recognition of strength, courage, and the fragile hope that maybe, together, they could find safety and belonging. The days grew warmer, and the Arizona sun cast long, golden rays over the creek where Aylin now moved with quiet confidence. She no longer flinched at Samuel's presence, instead, she seemed to acknowledge it with a subtle nod or a fleeting glance. Trust had grown slowly, like the ripples in the creek, delicate but undeniable. Samuel felt a mix of relief and awe every time he saw her, realizing that this fugitive, once a shadow in the wilderness, had become a part of his daily life. One morning, Aylin approached him at the edge of the creek, carrying a small bundle. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes searching his for approval. Samuel instinctively understood. She had decided to trust him completely. He gestured for her to come closer, and she moved cautiously, keeping one hand on the bundle, the other brushing her hair from her face. When she laid it down, he saw it was a set of tools and a handmade blanket, gifts for him, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they shared. "I don't want to hide anymore," Aylin said softly, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. Samuel nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "You won't have to," he replied, a quiet promise echoing in the stillness of the morning. Together, they walked back toward the ranch house, the creek behind them glimmering in the sunlight. The familiar path felt different now, alive with possibility rather than secrecy and fear. Life on the ranch became a new rhythm. Aylin helped with chores, learned to tend to the animals, and shared stories of her people when she felt safe enough to speak. Samuel marveled at her resilience, the way she adapted to this new life without losing her strength or spirit. Her beauty remained striking, but now it was the courage in her eyes, the dignity in her posture, and the laughter that occasionally escaped her lips that captivated him most. As the weeks passed, a quiet understanding blossomed between them. Samuel realized that Aylin had changed his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. She brought color to his routine, warmth to his solitude, and a reminder of the wild, untamed spirit that still existed in the world. Aylin, in turn, found safety and companionship, a place where she could rest without fear, yet still honor the freedom that defined her. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting the plains in shades of amber and rose, Samuel and Aylin sat by the creek. The water sparkled, reflecting the sky, and the air was filled with the gentle hum of cicadas. They didn't need words to express what had grown between them, a bond forged through trust, courage, and shared moments of vulnerability. In that quiet corner of Arizona, a fugitive had found sanctuary, and a rancher had found a companion unlike any other. As night fell and stars began to appear, Samuel watched Aylin dip her fingers into the creek, her face illuminated by the last light of the day. The world beyond the plains still held dangers and uncertainties, but here, in this secluded haven, they had found something rare and precious: safety, understanding, and the quiet promise of a shared life. Their story, born from chance and courage, had become a testament to resilience, trust, and the extraordinary beauty of the human spirit.